Good morning, church. Just to clarify, I am not Evan Kirby. I'm pretty sure that's in the NDA and T's and C's somewhere. Guests, visitors, I am not the preacher here at Broad Street. I'm simply filling in our preacher's absence. Where's he at now? South Dakota. I don't know, he just went to a gunfight in Deadwood or something like that. But anyway, today's message is going to look a little different. For those of you that don't know me, I'm actually not a preacher by trade. I'm not even in the line of any type of community-facing or social work. You may be wondering, who on earth let him in the pulpit today? I would like to assure you I am good at my trade. By trade, I'm an electrical engineer. So some have this notion that engineering is mysterious. We recently entertained some friends over at our house. And if you don't know any engineers, I guess this is how it's perceived. This lady asked, so you're an electrical engineer, do you hook up like light switches and stuff? And I was like, if it were that simple, I'd really enjoy my life measurably more. White's hot, black's not, green's ground. Or black's hot, white's not, green is ground. I would enjoy that a whole lot more. I think sometimes my wife really doesn't know what I do. She's just like, he goes to work. My kids are under the impression, after going to a family day at my job, that there's just a bouncy house at my work all the time. So, as a matter of fact, she said that this week. She's like, you gonna go work on the bouncy house? Yeah. So what do engineers do? Let's walk through your morning. Presumably you woke up under sheets that were made by a machine with either synthetic or natural materials. You presumably picked up an electronic device that had software running on it. You probably scooted across your carpet or LVP, walked into a shower that had heated, pressurized water, put soap on your body that you trusted, presumably. You presumably, where's Tom, brushed your teeth this morning with toothpaste that you trusted, put on clothes that were made of synthetic or natural materials. You eventually get into a vehicle that had some type of fuel it ran on, drove on some type of road to come to this building. So I'm going to go ahead and give you all a hint here. That stuff did not just auto-assemble. All of that I just talked about has some type of creative design behind it. And that's why I love the Old Testament scripture we read this morning. Where were you? God's talking to Job. Where were you when I stretched out the lines that measured the earth? As the engineer, I kind of like to give project managers a hard time. Where were you when I designed all this? I get a little bit of peek of what God might be saying here. But a little bit about me, and I don't do this to brag. On this next slide, these are some of the things I've got to work on. This lays the framework for what I'm going to be talking about today. I've worked on the USS Independence. I did power planning and weapons integration, Live, Laugh, Lockheed. I did an EV race car. I captained a team at Auburn. We did 0 to 60 in 1.2 seconds. I wrote software for an autonomous chicken house. So that little chicken house in the bottom corner just crawls across the pasture all day autonomously. Feeds, waters, cools chickens, solar powered. One of the cooler jobs I had, this yacht at the bottom, I put a frequency converter in this yacht so they can plug in anywhere in the world. Electricity's different around the world, believe it or not. And when you spend, close to $1 million on just equipment, you like it to run wherever you go in the world. If you would like to charter this yacht, I can get you in touch with the people that own it. For a mere $250,000 a week, you can charter motor yacht wheels. But again, I don't say this to get up here and brag about myself. I lay this as a framework. Most of my day is spent, it looks very boring, in a driver controls cabinet. What you're viewing there in the top middle is 99% of runs, everything that we just spoke about this morning, your day-to-day. So I say all of this to say we have observable constants in the universe, right? The Earth actually resonates as what's called the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz. That stays like the same. Thank goodness. Lee, if I were to ask you what, and this isn't like a trick question, gotcha. If I were to ask you what acceleration due to gravity is, what do you say? Okay, it's feet per second. So my generation's meter per second squared. I always like to see where the divide happened. But can you imagine if gravity was variable? We would just be floating in here, putting on seat belts. Thankfully, water does not have variable density. Tragic if that were the case. Thankfully, when you walked in this morning, we're not shifting from 3 to 2-dimensional planes. There is some order to the universe. That's what tells me there is creation behind it. And does anybody recognize that up in the top right corner? Just show of hands. Have you ever seen that old Donald Duck cartoon? I think it was made 1954. It's called Math-O-Magic. I think I wore that tape out at my grandmother's. But I totally forgot about it up until like 3 years ago. And all this imagery was just like a nostalgia explosion. There's like a guy explaining angles with a pool table, a Fibonacci spiral, shapes coming apart. Anyway, really interesting. If you get bored, Math-O-Magic is kind of cool with Donald Duck there. Here's another little note. Montessori, where are my Montessori people at? Remember the saltwater aquarium? I mean, those little saltwater fish are divas. You have to get every little number right in this aquarium, they all die. We're arguably polluting the oceans pretty hard, and the ocean's still teeming with life. There is some amount of creative design behind that. Something is adapting to everything we're doing. Does anybody know what a sine wave is? A sine wave is just an up and down, right? If I were to stick an oscilloscope in one of these sockets in the wall, we could observe a sine wave. Anybody ever stand next to a transformer and hear it humming? That's 60 hertz. What you're hearing is electrons 60 times per second going back and forth on the line. Europe uses 50 hertz. But I tend to look at the Bible kind of like a sine wave. There's a zero crossing. There's up and down. There's blessing. There's exile. And then there's penance, repentance, however you'd like to define that. It's just constant up and down. We could probably apply that to our own lives as well. And then we enter into revision control, right? That's really the title of this sermon. In the top left, it just looks like a boring spreadsheet. But on most engineering drawings, you're going to find the revision control block. This gives you all of the history of everything that has changed in a part, some design, some drawing. That's actually one I just did. It's redacted. But you can see in the red square, there's a list of changes that have happened. Does anybody use WD-40? That you are interacting with revision control. That is water displacement number 40. That was the 40th attempt at a water displacement formula by the Rocket Chemical Company in San Diego. Edison, admittedly, he claims 10,000 times he tried different materials to find the right light bulb filament. Now we're up to LEDs. Software revision control, the chicken coop thing I talked about earlier. There is a history of everything I changed with the software for the chicken coop. I want to stress here that the reason for revision control, do you think things are designed to be terrible? You might argue that. Your refrigerator breaks after a week that you just bought, and you're like, yeah, they just designed this stuff to be terrible. It's really not. What happened, I want us to keep this phrase in our mind throughout this whole lesson. The design corrupts the designer's intentions. It was never our intent to design something terrible. The design itself is corrupting our intentions. The average life cycle of a part usually goes through about 6 to 7 revisions before a total redesign or new part is prompted. At least in my experience with most companies, once you're on about revision 6 or 7, it's probably time to redesign the part and make something new. Now, I tend to like the way that software revisions are handled. You'll have a major, a minor, and a patch. You guys get phone updates all the time. Maybe you have a car that gets software updates, your laptop. A major update is something very wrong happened. We either had to prompt a hardware change, we had to prompt some type of major implementation. Minor might be, well, maybe your Facebook feed wasn't updating every time you scrolled up. Well, that might be a minor change. Well, we fixed that, if you tap the screen twice, it'll update. A patch is just little security patches. Those are Adam's favorite. A patch is just like we found this little security bug or just something very tiny that's somewhat insignificant. It's an improvement to the user experience. This is how I'm going to structure a revision control lesson today, though. So let's just roll right into it. We're going to go into the initial release. Garden, right? Version 1.00. Okay. Adam and Eve. Humanity's in a perfect environment. Moral awareness is unlocked. God has to clothe Adam and Eve. We're expelled from Eden. We have Cain and Abel. God marks Cain. And then we have the flood. This is what's wild. This part of the Bible, based on Septuagints and Masoretics, this is like a 1,600-year span. I think there's pubs in England that are like 1,600 years old. From Adam and Eve to the flood is 1,600 years. And here's a question that's really not meant for the belittlement of your knowledge, nor is it rhetorical, so please speak up. I mean, so me and Chelsea were talking about this. Your gut tells you the Passover, right? Your gut tells you the Passover. But what were Adam and Eve clothed with? Well, they tried to hide their nakedness with fig leaves. But God had to come and kill an animal and cover their sins with a sacrifice. The very first sacrifice, the very two people. We may not label it sacrifice, but because of their sins, an animal had to die to cover their sin. The very first murder. Cain killed Abel because he was jealous of an offering, a sacrifice. That's not captured in our canonical scriptures necessarily. How did they know to do that? So the oral tradition says Adam and Eve likely taught them from direct intervention with God, but can we identify with that? There's no official score sheet we have, and here is Cain killing Abel. Like, whoa. Why are you giving him preference when we don't have a score sheet yet? And this period's really interesting too. So we're covering quite a bit in archaeology. These people appeared to be very advanced around the time when we think the flood happened. I've read piles of books and documents on how advanced we were up until the Younger Dryas impact, which is what I believe caused the flood. It matches about the time period. Anyway, I won't get into that, but I want us to keep in mind for the rest of the lesson that 6 to 7 times in a revision is usually when you have to start a part all over. So ultimately, man's ignorance and lawlessness prompt a major update, right? A sine wave. We've just gone through a cycle. We're blessed. We're in the garden. We're literally at the peak of human experience. And we have to eat the fruit. We have to talk to the snake. We have to kill our brother. But God still has something to do through Cain. Version 2.0. Post-flood. We get a rainbow patch, right? No more global floods, and we get the language expansion pack. Um, this is probably one of the most misunderstood parts of the Bible and poorly documented. Yet this is honestly my favorite part of the Bible right here. We talked about a 1600-year span based on, again, Masoretic and Septuagints. Using the same basis, this is like a 300-year span from getting out of the ark to confusing everyone's language. It gets 2 chapters. Y'all think about this. We completely started over. Like if you're Christians in here, you believe the entire earth was flooded. We started completely over. Do you understand how much Noah and his sons actually had to know to rebuild civilization coming out of the ark? They had to be some pretty smart guys. Smart enough that they had enough technology to get the Tower of Babel built up, right? The Tower of Babel is really interesting. It's a tiny piece of scripture, but it claims to be the basis of all language. Think about this. What does God keep telling them right after they get out of the boat? First thing he told Adam and Eve, be fruitful, multiply. The first thing he tells Noah when he gets out of the ark, be fruitful and multiply. He wanted them to spread, the text keeps saying over and over in this part of Genesis, spread out. I want you to multiply and spread out. Multiply and spread out. What do? They build a tower. They build a tower out of what? More importantly, is stone and mortar? Mm-mm. The Bible says it's built out of fired brick and tar. They're like, oh, no. Stone and mortar's very water permeable. We're going to build this out of brick and tar. They build a tall tower out of water impermeable material. They're building ziggurats to bring God down to them in one place. Over and over, he's like, spread out, spread out, spread out. And they still don't listen. So to me, it's a kind of a little funny, like, okay, well, if you won't listen, then presto changeo. You can't understand each other now. God's like, I already gave you this rainbow covenant. I'm not going to flood the earth again. Stop building this tower. God's the ultimate engineer. He installs the patch. I gave you a new covenant. Another sine wave. Another revision. Abraham. There's a new architecture now. A restoration plan. Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Israel's foundations are formed. Joseph saves Egypt and his family. In our text, Abraham's father is Terah. We need to understand who Terah is. Terah was very close to Nimrod in Babylon. I'll give you a hint. Babylon did not worship Yahweh. So how does somebody from the son of a guy worshiping Marduk in Babylon, how does Yahweh suddenly pick him? So Abram, in the book of Jasher, we do not put that in our canon. But the book of Jasher actually fills in some of the cracks here. God in our text is just kind of like, I like this Abram fella. I'm going to nation build with him and such. Jasher actually breaks down, Abram questioned the entire Babylonian pantheon. He did not like what his dad was doing. He had heard about this God named Yahweh, who is all-powerful. I invite you to read Jasher and approach it with the correct mindset of, we're not sure if this was 100% correct or not, but it does fill in a lot of the gaps. We do not have the original copy. It's kind of just a fun read. Nevertheless, Josephus actually said, he coined the phrase, what you don't write is just as important as what you do write. So all we know is that Abram was chosen. God renamed him Abraham. I manage a ton of projects. Like, I'm in Project City right now at work. I can catch a little glimpse of what God's doing here. God's like, you guys have done nothing but fail and just cycle on and off. I can't trust anybody. I need one person. I need like a ride or die to get my covenant going. Abraham's the guy. So Abram gets renamed Abraham. He gets visited by 3 angels. This is a very interesting story. So as one does, 3 angels show up at my door, one supposedly God, and I just yell at Chelsea and tell her to start making biscuits. That's personally what I do when 3 angels show up at my door. So 3 angels show up at Abraham's door. He feeds them, and right after they eat, God's like, so your wife's going to have a baby, and I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And good deal. So Genesis 15. God's got to get this NDA, this contract going, right? In an ancient Near Eastern fashion. So God has, I want us to think about this through this whole sermon. God has Abraham butcher a ton of animals, like a variety of animals. He butchers them. It's very grim. I understand, kids. But he butchers all these animals, and he lays them, he halves them on either side. And this was kind of a Near Eastern ancient way of making a blood oath, saying, I'm going to walk through these animals, and if I do not hold up my end of the deal, I'm going to end up like these animals. So Abraham does this. God commanded him to do it. And Abraham is taking like his first steps into it, and God says, hang on a minute. Abraham goes into a deep sleep, and he sees a torch pass through these split animals. The torch is actually God passing through these split animals. God is stepping in here and saying, like, Abraham, you're my ride or die. I can't even trust you. I'm done with a lot of humanity. I'll pass through these split animals. I will make the blood oath covenant for you. I'm going to tell you what, I work with a lot of contractors. I do not love them enough to do something like that. I'm not passing through split animals for any of my contractors, nor am I offering up, spoiler alert, nor am I offering up Thomas as a propitiation for any of that. So later on, Genesis 22, Abraham has this little mid-year performance review. He's asked to sacrifice his son. And this is a talking point for a lot of people outside the church. They're like, what kind of loving God would ask him to do that? I want to remind you, right down the road in Babylon, they're actively doing children's sacrifice, and nobody's stopping them. This is happening, all over the known world at the time. So God's like, I need to test your faith. Go take your son Isaac up to this altar and sacrifice him to me. And he's about to. Difference here is he stops him right before he does that. He's like, all right, you passed the test. You're legit. We're going to stick with you, Abraham. So Father Abraham has many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. This covenant develops. Isaac begets Jacob, who leads the 12 tribes. Jacob likes his son Joseph, but his other brat kids sell him into slavery over a coat. Joseph goes through some pretty awful stuff in Egypt, but ultimately he keeps God's covenant and saves the family's bacon. He relocates all of his family just outside of Egypt to avoid this famine, and they start multiplying. Another cycle. So now we're going to start nation building. I think God here is like, it's go time. It's time. His people have kind of been on a performance review, and their probationary period's coming to an end here in Egypt. Keep in mind, during their time in Egypt, they're not performing any sacrifices. To get them out, God kind of gave Moses instructions on how to kick off these 10 plagues. Moses, Pharaoh, ooh baby, let my people go, is not going to let a large chunk of his workforce just leave on a whim. So God's like, we need to send some plagues. So God gives Moses instructions on how to kick all this off. The Passover was their first real commanded sacrifice, and presented itself as something they had to do to leave Egypt. This is kind of like a deposit, right? They're like, God's like, I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you guys to start making this sacrifice. They paint their doors. Bad things are happening. In Exodus 8, right in the middle of the plagues, Pharaoh is like, wow, can you stop? Can you stop doing this right now? Why don't y'all go out to the wilderness and start making sacrifices so we can stop this? Just don't get too far away. Moses quickly whips out the contract agreements and warned Pharaoh that Hebrew sacrifices would be an abomination to the Egyptians because they think cows and rams are sacred. So if they do this, they're going to get stoned to death. He tells them, no deal. I'm going to let you read for yourself on why the last plague was necessary, because that is a hot topic among those outside the church. So they leave Egypt. Miracle after miracle. They leave Egypt. Moses parts the sea. He takes them out to this place. They just watched an entire army get washed over. So Moses is just like, okay, you guys sit and chill. I got to walk up Sinai and get our new CNRs, right? I want to highlight, these people just witnessed miracle after miracle. We talked about cattle being sacred. What do they do while he's on Sinai? They take off as much gold as they can and build a golden idol of a calf as God is sitting up on Sinai getting their new agreements. These people just witnessed all this happen, and they're doing this. Talk about a sine wave. Like, this is just how brainwashed they were from all their time in Egypt. Supposedly, if there's ever a party, you build golden idols. Like that's what happened. They were excited, build a golden calf. This is a good lesson that habits are hard to break. So 40 years goes by, they get the 10 Commandments, they're eating manna, they're wandering around the peninsula, they're making sacrifices in the tabernacle. Guess what they're doing while they're out there? Up and down. Revision change. We're going to build a kingdom. Keyword being king. Tribal structure becomes monarchy. There's a central leadership. We get prophetic corrections. I think God at this point is like, time to light this candle. I got him out. We're going to build a kingdom. Here we go. So on the way to the promised land, they meet Sihon with the Amorites. They had to beat them. They meet Og. Go read about Og. Og is super interesting. He's a giant, like a very large giant. It gives details on how big he is. Let's read it in your free time. Really cool. He attacks them, and Israel destroys his bunch and took their land. A king named Balak is like, what's happening right now out in the wilderness, or around this area, rather. This guy hires a pagan named Balaam to curse Israel, but God stopped him using an angel and a talking donkey. Now, I like to pretend that this angel could possibly look like Shrek. I just like to think that. I don't know. So lots of stuff happens in this time period. Moses dies. Joshua gets picked to lead. They bring the ark into Canaan. They get to building. The Philistines take away the ark. Everybody's upset with the judges. The last judge being Samuel. Samuel has rotten kids. And the people are like, we want a king. God's like, I specifically said we're not going to do that. And they're like, we want a king. It's like, whatever. Have a king, just chill out. If having a king's what you need, fine. We read about this in the aptly named Book of Kings. So enter Saul. He unites all the tribes. Fell out of favor, shocker. David, his successor, comes around. He's making waves around 1000 BC for about 30 years. Jerusalem's the capital now. He does the thing, falls out of favor. He died around 70 years old. Solomon takes over and builds the temple. What What do we know about Solomon? The wise, rich guy, right? If you read Psalm and Proverbs, though, Solomon is mostly complaining about his women problems. He had 700 wives and like 300 concubines. Wise man. His problems with the ladies got bad enough. He started marrying foreign women that brought foreign gods in, and things got bad enough. The kingdom actually split north and south. So the Yankees go into exile with the Assyrians, and then the Southerners go down to Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. That's modern day Iraq. This happened about 580 BC. That's a sine wave. Like, you had a fourth quarter 35-point lead. Y'all literally bowled over giants on your way to the promised kingdom. You had everything. You had everything. And you fell so hard, like you blew it. You had your kingdom. I mean, if we want to get nerdy and talk about amplitudes, this little section of the Bible's, off the charts. Like, I can't fathom how hard you'd have to fail. You were given a nation, and you just couldn't listen. So now we go into recovery mode. We load a recovery revision, right? Remember what I said? It takes about 6 to 7 revisions before you just got to start over. So we're in exile. We're in survival mode. There's some prophets. We eventually make our way out. Ezra and Nehemiah start building the temple and building up Jerusalem. And there's a covenant renewal. So the Southerners actually picked up a lot of bad habits in their 30 years they spent in Babylon. Do you know that who in here has heard of the name Mordecai? What is the root word there in Mordecai? It's Marduk. Remember the Babylonian god we just talked about? There are still people being named today Mordecai, follower of Marduk. That's the type of habits they picked up while they're in captivity. And what did they do? They stopped sacrificing because there's now no what? There's no temple, so they can't make sacrifices. So they shift to this portable-based faith on synagogues and studying Torah. Does that sound familiar? Do we have a temple today? No. We're still doing this today. So some prophets come in and are like, hey, God still loves you. He's going to bring you back. You just needed to learn a lesson. In 539 BC, there's this guy named Cyrus the Great. God kind of comes in and taps him on the shoulder like, you're going to be my shepherd right now. In Isaiah, he comes along and he frees everybody. Cyrus is like the good guy meme. A good guy Cyrus. Cyrus went and freed all of these people he had nothing to do with, and he was literally just like, hey, just be good good clients of mine. That's all I ask. Just respect me. He was just playing the game. Lickety split. The next year after they get released from their captivity, the altar gets built. In 536 BC, the foundation of the second temple is laid. So they start doing sacrifices at the temple again, and Nehemiah starts fortifying the city. This part of the Bible, right after that, it gets a little quiet. There's, again, canonical disagreements. There's a lot of things we don't have in our canon, but like in First Maccabees and in separate historical text, in 332 BC, Alexander takes Jerusalem and he introduces Greek culture. The temple ends up getting desecrated. Daniel actually prophesied this. It's documented in First Maccabees. Alexander's protege, Antiochus, sacrifices a pig in the temple. So that causes a bunch of ruckus. They split up for like 150 years. Judas Maccabeus led a revolt called Hanukkah, or led a revolt that we celebrate now as Hanukkah in 167 BC. And they do their thing for about 100 years. Rome takes over and installs Herod the Great. Another cycle. Revision 7. 6 or 7 revisions before a whole new part needs to be designed. Ironically, when I was trying to structure this message, I was like, I'm going to try to break down the Bible in major revisions. I'm going to do it myself, and then I'm going to ping AI. I use Copilot, ChatGPT, and Grok, and it kind of actually broke it up the same way. So it's funny that we're on revision 7 from several different understandings of the Bible. 7.7 is what we're on right now. We are living in this revision. If you're God, everything people have done on earth is exactly what they were not supposed to do. So again, the design corrupts the designer's intentions. Every other religion, and I guess you could call them secular texts, recognize Jesus as somebody important or of note. Even I saw something recently, the Chinese, so somebody in the Han Dynasty actually documented the eclipse that happened at about the time that Christ was crucified. They acknowledge that in that writing, it actually says all the sins of the world became on one man. That was a Chinese script. Somebody that didn't have much knowledge of what was going on here. Right? But in this, he sends prophets. They're paving the way. John the Baptist, he's just kind of out here humbly eating locusts, wearing camel skins, as one does. He's making disciples. So I'm here to ask you, what's everybody's excuse? I, for one, am not wearing camel skins. Locusts aren't that good to me. But this guy was doing it. He's making disciples. God's like, my creation has messed up so bad that I now have to abide by my covenant I made with Abraham. Who passed through the pieces? Was it Abraham? No. God, the torch, passed through the pieces. Remember, the covenant is, should I mess up, I have to become like these split animals. Well, God passed through for us. Here is the covenant of Abraham being fulfilled. And again, I've designed a lot of stuff. I don't love them enough to do that. Okay? I think that's the important topic for this whole sermon. Is there's an intelligent designer who loves you enough. You have literally messed up his entire creation. He's still going to walk through those pieces for you. Your Father loves you more than just a little experiment. You're more than just observing your wall sockets with an oscilloscope, right? So he comes down for one last covenant, human birth into flesh, and albeit 2 commandments. That's all he gave us. 2 commandments and a blood sacrifice that we can't top anymore. We don't need another sacrifice. That temple tore. There is no more temple. The veil tore. We have God's Spirit in us. And Jesus kind of flips everything on his head. He's not flooding the earth. He's not sending down flaming balls of sulfur in Sodom and Gomorrah. He's not killing firstborns in Egypt. He's not sending angels to slay armies. This dude is kind of flipping the script here. And this is the revision that sets up the final revision. He fulfilled the Abrahamic covenant. He took on flesh. He died a very humiliating death. The cross was only reserved to humiliate people. 3 days later, he defeats death. We're promised everlasting life. That covenant has been fulfilled. Jesus has died for us. And lastly, revision 8. I told you it takes about 6 or 7 revisions before you start over. New heaven and new earth. This one's pending. Pending revisions, that's not normal in things, but we know it's pending because we can look in the back of the book, right? I literally can't wait for this. I mean, the way we hear it described, gold paved streets, a walkable community, right? Just and moral people, there's no sickness. We actually get to feel home with our Creator. And we just gather here 1 day per week to remember that ultimate sacrifice that was made for us so we can go here, so we can have this. But this morning as I close church, I just invite all of you to accept Christ as your personal Savior. If you haven't already, this kingdom awaits. We know what's pending here. So our redemption is eternal now. And church, I just ask that if you have questions about this final release, you can come talk to me up here this morning, if you're brave enough, or you can go speak to the elders in the back. But church, won't you celebrate this final revision, this redemption, this morning as we close and as we stand and as we sing?